5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And it's live.
This is Leicester Till I Die TV. Watch and subscribe on YouTube and listen on your podcast platform.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good night, good day, goodbye, hello, wherever you are in the world, one of those will apply to you. This is LTID TV from Leicester Till I Die. Thank you for joining us live on this YouTube show. If that is how you are watching us, please join in the comments. And if you've got any questions for our special guest this evening, stick them in the comments and I'll try and get through a few of those towards the end. If you're watching on catch up, stick your comments below on YouTube. We're always interested in reading those. And if you are listening via your favourite podcast platform, whatever that may be, welcome along. I started supporting Leicester in my early teens, I guess. So I'm going back years, more than I care to remember. And one of the things that I was said even back then, supporting Leicester will be like a roller coaster. We seem to have more downs than ups, though, Rob.
Recently, yeah, but in the 16 years I've been covering them, there's been many more ups than downs. It's been has been a roller coaster ride, but it was
you're a child.
It's been an incredible rise, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, don't get me wrong. I always say, and people do ask this, and it's a kind of standard question, like, if you knew what you knew now, but could have mid-table security, but not win the Premier League, not win the FA Cup, etc., would you do it? No, I'd do it all again.
I'm sure most Leicester fans would say that. Do it all again. I mean, obviously, the situation they're in at the moment is very, very difficult and disappointing. But in what memories, you create history. I mean, obviously, did you watch Europa League final?
No.
What a terrible season Spurs have, but they've got a piece of silverware, and I'm sure they wouldn't trade that with Arsenal. I'm sure they'd take the silverware and not want to finish second runners up in the Premier League. Is what I'm saying. Like, you've got to those moments you've got to seize, and pieces of silverware in the mantelpiece are what football's all about. It's about winning trophies and success, and with success comes failure as well. So it is what it is. Over the last since the promotion to the Premier League the first time, it's been a really incredible journey. And even before then, going down to League One, then coming back up and getting to playoffs and penalty shootout heartaches, and the Watford. There's always been some drama around Leicester City.
There has, and I think somebody once said again, you have to suffer the downs to enjoy the ups.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you appreciate them all the more. If there are bad times, when the good times come around, just embrace them, enjoy them, revel in them, because you know what's around the corner.
Yeah. And usually around the corner, waiting for you with a big net, is PSR. I mean, first of all, kind of expected, wasn't it? Because, we have to accept that PSR is a 3-year rolling time period that it's based on. And you have to let that go through the system, don't you, for it to clear. So it can take 2 or 3 years for a bad season to drop off your figures.
Exactly. Once you're in PSR territory, it's very, you've really got to make some deep and serious cuts to get yourself back on an even keel. And as you said, it's over a 3-year rolling cycle, as it is at the moment, and they voted for it to remain that way for another year. I mean, I think we'll see an annual vote on this, whether to bring in a ratio or stick with this current system. But yeah, Leicester, I mean, I've been saying it for a long time, even though they won the case for the 22-23 season on appeal. There was the Premier League and the EFL weren't going to let it go, and they certainly haven't. And it was in arbitration, and sooner or later, Leicester weren't going to be able to avoid. I don't think. I mean, obviously, it's only a charge at the moment. They haven't been found guilty of anything. We'll stress that. But, the signs are ominous this time that because they've been tightening up their regulations to make sure that Leicester they've embarrassed them, really, because they've looked at their rule book and exposed it for its frailties and the way it's written. And so they've tightened it up now. And I think retribution might be coming down the line.
Well, this is the thing. And, I've spoken with, we've done shows with other presenters on here and what have you. When you look at the statement, and I'm just trying to bring it up now because I don't think the EFL have still commented yet, but it is one. And is it right that 2 separate organisations actually like sort of Tesco buying Morrison's and saying we're going to charge the same for a pint of beans, a tin of beans?
Yeah. No, it is a strange scenario. I mean, the simplistic thing for the whole of PSR because we've got 2 leagues. So Leicester have been able to argue they can fall between the cracks between the 2. So what they've been doing, they've been tightening up their regulations to ensure that teams bouncing between the 2. And there's a lot of teams that do this, bounce between the 2 divisions now because, staying in the Premier League has become so much harder. So they don't avoid sanction. But they still haven't got their ducks in a row, really, between the EFL and the Premier League. They're not quite on the same wavelength. There needs to be one fits all regulations, I think, but there isn't. So now this is the situation we find in. It's still very uncertain. It's all very new. It's all we don't really know a timeline. We can look at previous cases like Everton's and say that's it could be September, October before we know what the punishment is, and then there's a process as well. So this could drag on for a fair few months as well, Chris. So we don't really know what the score is at the moment, but we know that if Leicester are found guilty and the case for the Premier League is proven, then it could be a serious points deduction for them.
Well, that obviously is been the title of the show tonight. Sorry, my light is just completely. What's the technical term for it? Buggered, I think. What gets me is yes, I get that. All right, there's rules. If you're in the EFL, do you sort of vote on this though, or is it just the Premier League? I mean, let's say, for example, Stockport County have obviously just got promoted back to the league. Do they get a chance to vote on these rules?
I'm not sure about the EFL, to be honest. I know all the member clubs in the Premier League vote every year.
Yeah.
You got me there. I don't know, Chris, to be honest, on the EFL, if all the member clubs vote these rules. And I should imagine it's very similar to the Premier League in that regard. Because obviously we talk about the gap between the Championship and the Premier League, but there's also a big gulf within the EFL as well between the haves and the have-nots. I mean, obviously parachute payments, the clubs coming down like Leicester are at an advantage. But the reason we have parachute payments is because, they've got big contracts that they've got to honour. I mean, there might be relegation clauses in all those contracts, and there are. So those players will be taking something like 30-35% pay cut to come down into the Championship. But that still puts them at a massive advantage against everybody else. I mean, last time Leicester came down, those relegation clauses were triggered, so that reduced their wage bill. But they went out and spent some money as well on other players, and ended up with the £107 million playing budget, which was £30 million more than anybody else in that division. So they did have an advantage in that, and this is the situation they're in now. Being charged for that season. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for them for the 22-23 season, because they didn't see that coming, that relegation. Yeah. They were budgeting for top 8 because that's where they'd finished in the previous 3 seasons. I don't think it's unreasonable for them to budget for another tilt at European football. For it to go so dreadfully wrong has really caught them out. I think there's a little less mitigation when they dropped into the Championship, that they didn't cut deeper into their budget. As I said, not many clubs can go and spend £10 million on a Harry Winks in the Championship. So I don't think there'll be a lot of mitigation from the Premier League and the EFL for this 23-24 charge.
But what gets me though is like, this is a rule that now applies to clubs in the Championship and clubs in the Premier League. But it appears that only the clubs in the Premier League are voting on it.
No, I think the EFL probably have got a voting. As I said, I don't really know, but they have got a voting process, and I think it really only applies, from what I've seen, to the Championship. I mean, League One, Birmingham City were spending all sorts of money. I mean, I talked about not many Championship teams spend £10 million on Harry Winks. They spent 15 on Jay Stansfield. So, it doesn't look like PSR is really kicking in lower down the pyramid. It only seems to be in the Championship. So, it's just one of those really strange situations, because there's no precedent and there's no clarity, and it's not open and it's not open to scrutiny in many ways. I mean, we're suggesting this could be, minimum 12 point, if it's proven, the case is proven, deduction for Leicester, but it could be even more. But there's no, I mean, we're going off the fact that Everton got 10 for one charge. And that was for a 19 million breach. Now, Leicester's estimated breach in 22-23 was 19 million. They've managed to get out of that one. But if they're somewhere in the same territory for 23-24, which is likely, that precedent will come in, and there won't be any mitigation for cooperation. I mean, they've said that in the statement. The fact that Leicester have made it as difficult as possible for the Premier League.
I want to ask about that, because, and one of the charges, it's like you said, this is on the Premier League statement, the club's obligation, no, it's not that one, sorry. The club's obligation to provide full, complete and prompt assistance to the Premier League in response to the target's inquiries. Not wanting to get myself into the same trouble as Gary Lineker did, but it's almost like Nazi Germany. Like, we're going to charge you, but don't appeal. Don't have any form of defence at all, because once you do, we'll make it worse for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like a court of law. If you're charged with a crime, you go in and say, "Yeah, fair cop," you're going to get a reduced sentence.
But what I'm saying is, if you still don't, if you say, "Well, no, actually, I'm innocent," you've still got. They don't add it on, if you like. If you're guilty at the end of that, you're guilty. Yes, if you plead guilty first, like you say, you might get a reduced sentence. But if you go through the court system and all the trial, if you're going to get 20 months, you get that.
In the legal system as well, there is guidelines on what is appropriate sentencing regarding the specific crime, and it's a little bit similar with PSR. But because it's all so new and there's only been a few clubs that really been done for it, but nobody really knows what those are. I mean, as I said, I mentioned Everton, 19 million, and they got 10 points reduced to 6 on appeal. Nottingham Forest, theirs was way over that for their breach. And they cooperated a lot with them. They said, look, this is unavoidable. We had to do this because we had no players. They were all out of contracts, and when we got promoted, and they signed something like 20 odd players. that season. So their mitigation was, look, we had no choice.
No.
So they went way over the budget, but they got less points. So it doesn't seem to be any specific sort of structure to it.
Well, this is the thing as well. Have you read my notes? This is the thing as well, is that, if you murder somebody, you pretty much know the range of that you're going to get. If you found guilty, like you say, 10 points for Everton. If Everton had put themselves into administration, they'd have only got 9 points. I mean, there's no, it seems to me that, the Premier League, and look, everybody sort of knows that it's run by people that don't have a clue about football. And that's just my personal opinion, of course. But, there's no, whether it was the little, if you do this, it's so many points. If you do this, so people know what it is. It's just a case of, oh, hang on, you've done that. Let me just say, how many points? What do you think? 6? Oh, 9. Anybody raising 9? I've got 11 over there. It's a bit like an auction.
Yeah, it's that's why it's very hard to be certain about what may be coming down the line. But all we can say is there's 3 charges that they're facing for the 23-24 season. The fact that they have fought so hard would suggest then that the Premier League and the EFL would like to make an example of Leicester City and impose the maximum they possibly can on them to deter other teams from behaving in a similar manner in terms of the regulations. So that's why we think if it's going to be proven this time round, and as I said, the regulations have been tightened up, it could be a significant points deduction. When that will be applied and how that will be applied remains to be seen as well. This is another uncertainty about it. Are they going to because they try and do this process within the next season after, regarding to those specific accounts. So they're 23-24, so it should be applied this season. Now, if they're going to take put a significant points deduction on Leicester City this season, we won't mind. Nobody would mind. But it's not really then a deterrent, is it? It doesn't really have any impact if they retrospectively put that points deduction on this season. I mean, it will impact on Leicester's prize money in the Premier League.
Yeah,
if they finish bottom then of the Premier League, it's probably cost them nearly £6 million. But then it's the equivalent of just having a fine, rather than any sort of meaningful punishment. So that's why I think it could be, and they will be looking to, I think, the Premier League and the EFL putting the points deduction on next season, which will then be 2 seasons after the alleged breach. So,
but they've come out, haven't they, and said we want to try and do these things quicker.
Yeah, but I think because Leicester,
that's another reason why. Yeah, but that's another reason why maybe they're saying to clubs, don't fight it. If we slap your wrist, you accept it, because if you fight it, it's just going to delay things.
Yeah,
I mean, again, it all seems like like I say, very much like a totalitarian state running it.
I mean, that is the nature of football when you think about a referee. It's not a committee. It's not a debate, is it, with a referee?
Well, it is now, isn't it, with VAR?
Players might try, but
yes,
the referee's decision is final. And and if you argue, then there's sanctions for you in a yellow card or a red card. And it's the same principle in terms of the clubs that it seems to be in terms of football authorities. If you argue, challenge, and your point isn't not on legally sound ground, then you get an extra punishment. You get a punishment. So this is the scenario we're in now with Leicester. I mean, they've argued. I mean, they've managed to fight off quite a bit so far. But it looks like this time, the net is tightening a little bit around them. I think I've likened it on this show to like a tag team in wrestling, isn't it? They've both been tagging each other in to have a go.
Yes.
And so far, Leicester keep kicking out of the 1, 2, 3, but I think this time their shoulders might be on the mat. But you never know. Nick DeMarco has done wonders in the past, but I
would imagine Susan Whelan's got his number on speed dial.
Well, yeah, I think they've probably been in regular communication with him for a long time.
Yes, yeah.
Because we've known this is coming down the line.
Well, this exactly. Like I say, when you're looking ahead and you're planning for that year, you're thinking, right, whatever we do this season is going to bite us on the bum for 3 seasons if it's wrong, because that's the thing. But I would argue about the referee and the totalitarian, because you have got a linesman or assistant referee, whatever they call them these days, that you can politely go over and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Referee, would you mind just going and having a chat with your assistant?" Or
yeah, but they never change their mind, do they? They never. You're right. That was offside. Yeah, I agree with you. I've never seen that happen.
No, I haven't, and I think only twice since it's been introduced I've ever seen a referee argue or disagree with VAR. But you're saying about the tightening the rules, and I get that. Once we did what we did, which I think was, not just for us. I think it's said to all the clubs. Look, make sure that if you're being charged, that you're not being, taken for a ride. But when you say that tightening the rules, then you look at sort of, and I know we keep going back to the same clubs, but Chelsea selling the women's football team to themselves.
Yeah.
All this swapping of youngsters between clubs. The question as a Leicester fan is, I'm not saying, and I would have expected the loophole or the whatever you want to call it, bad management of bad rule writing. I get that, and I get why they're tidying that up. But they're not looking at these other obvious things to us as fans.
I totally agree with Chris, and it's very frustrating for football fans. I mean, all the comments on the articles that we've written on this subject always say the same thing. Well, what about Man City? What about Chelsea? Why are they getting away with it? Why is it only the aspiring clubs like Forest who, were coming into and wanting to compete in the Premier League, and they have now they're in a position where they are competing. Everton were pushing hard to compete and upset the elite of English football. Leicester have done it, and they're paying the price now for the financial cost that came with that. It does seem to me that PSR, which was designed to try and protect clubs from being stretched financially to the point where they're broken and their futures are threatened, and to save them from that, which has happened in the lower leagues. But at this level, it seems to be doing is blocking and protecting the elite established clubs. Because obviously, they're a moving target. To catch them, you've got to spend a lot of money because their revenues still keep going up and up and up. I mean, the Premier League is a global league in many ways. It's watched around the world, global fan bases, TV rights from around the world. It's the richest league in the world for a reason. Everybody wants to watch, even though the Europa League between Man United and Tottenham was dire last night. It wasn't a great advert for the league. No. But, usually people want to watch the Premier League because it's exciting, it's fast and furious. But those big clubs have become global brands. And Leicester have been trying to become a global brand, but they've just shown a little bit too much ambition. They've been a little bit unlucky in terms of how COVID affected them, in terms of their revenue. They did sort of chase the dream under Brendan in terms of how much they spent on contracts and, on transfer fees as well. They were going up. And they've just been caught out, and they've been scrambling since, trying to avoid the inevitable sanctions that have come, and they have done up to this point. But I think this may be one step too far now.
One of the other things that was in that statement, the club's obligation to provide its annual accounts to the Premier League for the season mentioned by the 31st of December 2024. I was told yesterday how true this is. I can only take the gentleman's word on it. That the accounts for that were needed by then were signed off by the accountants on the 19th of December, were signed off by Susan Whelan on the 19th of December, but were sat on because of the financial position. But if you know that it's like if you're self-employed, you've got to get your tax return in by the 5th of April or whatever it is. I'm not self-employed, but and you know very clearly if you don't get them in on time, that the Inland Revenue can charge you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
why was it sat on? Why wasn't she doing her job?
I don't know the ins and outs of that, but my perception was at the time, 23-24, they were a championship club, and they were fighting this issue on jurisdiction. who has the right to sanction them and when, and because they'd argued they were no longer a Premier League club at the end of 22-23 and not yet an EFL club, and weren't an EFL club for that 22-23 accounts. They were then, this is my understanding, they then argued in 23-24, well, why do the Premier League need to see our accounts? Because we're a Championship club now. So, it's that was whole issue of jurisdiction. This is why it went to arbitration in the end, because it was an impasse. And Leicester successfully argued that they fell between the two.
Yeah.
And the Premier League, and they did so on appeal, and the Premier League went, right, let's go to arbitration on this, because this can't stand, we can't have clubs arguing that they were neither when clearly they are. So that's why it went to an arbitration process. And both sides claimed victory, but obviously Leicester won the argument not won the argument for 22-23. There wasn't sufficient reason to overturn the independent appeal committee's decision to uphold Leicester's appeal. So 22-23 is gone in terms of the Premier League.
Yeah,
but they then said, look, okay, you are definitely under Premier League jurisdiction. So the Premier League straight away went, right, great, that's the green light for us now to put in a charge, and we will charge, because the two now can work together. We will charge for 23-24 because you've come into the division on the back of that season, and we think you've overspent, and that's why they've hit them with the charges for 23-24. And the EFL, the EFL now could, because they weren't involved in the Premier League process, they could say, well, we opened the investigation into Leicester for 22-23 during 22-24 when they were a Championship club. Perhaps we can revisit that for 22-23. Now they're back in the Championship. So there's so much that could happen, really. But I think one thing that is for certain is they want to punish Leicester. They want to make sure that Leicester get a substantial punishment to deter other clubs.
Yes,
is my reading of the situation anyway.
And I would imagine. I'm getting to the point now where I'm thinking, look, let's just take whatever they give to us and let's just get it out the way.
I think there's a lot of people share that view now, Chris. They've for all the fighting they've had off the field, there's been very little fight on the field this season. So they're back in a situation where really they need to get to reset, zero, and let's go again. So if they have to take a big points punishment, and it might be a year of transition for them, get all those high earners off the books again, put some faith in some youth in the team, back them for a year, try and get the fans back on board as well, because it's quite obvious there's a huge disconnect between the fans and the boardroom level. The Jamie Vardy party final home game of the season was a great occasion for Jamie, but you could still audibly hear the discontent from the fans. Most notably when the current team came out to line up with the legends to give a guard of honour to Jamie, and you could hear "You're not fit to wear the shirt" coming from the East Stand, and so you got to try and get them back on board as well. It might be you just have to bite the bullet a little bit and reset, and then try and go again.
For a lot of fans, and I always say this, if the away end toilets got blocked, it'd be John Rudkin's fault. Mm-hmm. But there's, I think Susan Whelan gets away with a lot for her position, and we know, however much we want them to, we know that they will be there next season. Top trusts them. At the end of the day, it's Top's money and his company money. But for this, it's giving the fans another stick to beat the club by, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It doesn't help the situation at all, because it screams of mismanagement, almost arrogance in some way. That they've gone this far with it, but because inevitably the outcome was going to be pretty bad at the end. But we'll see what happens, because we don't know yet. As I said, I don't know what the basis of their defence will be. It'll be quite a drawn out, probably a week in court, arguing the toss over this, that, and the other. And We'll see what the outcome is, but I just sense there's a real determination to punish Leicester, and it will impact massively on a lot of things. Here we are talking about next season, and I read in Top's programme notes for the Southampton game that planning for next season's already begun. What's the plan? We don't know.
No.
Ruud van Nistelrooy doesn't know what the plan is because they haven't told him, they haven't spoke to him, which would suggest that he's on borrowed time. But so what is the plan? And will that plan change now if they're facing a massive points deduction? Does it change now that they got to put their faith in youth? They've got to get off the books some of these bigger wage earners. They might have to take a bath on a few deals. They might have to negotiate selling up certain people's contracts. It really is an uncertain time for Leicester. We don't even know who the manager is going to be next season. So what this planning, what's taking place at the moment, God only knows, because we don't know, and I think only a couple of people in the club do know. And
this is, I think nothing we can do about it. But it's always been like this with King Power. They've never been the most communicative of clubs. But like I said, we've been relegated. Is it good that it's happening now off season? And at least you would hope by the start of next season that we might, we will know where we stand, points.
I don't think we will. By the start of next season. Obviously the season tickets situation has passed, so we know that all the season tickets have been sold, not all renewed, by significantly not. But there's been quite a few, obviously, members that have been on the waiting list that have snapped up the spare season tickets for next season. But we had a real problem last summer with the PSR charges and that hanging over the club. It did put off a number of potential signings when Steve Cooper was trying to negotiate deals. They didn't want to come with that uncertainty. Well, there's even more uncertainty at the moment. I did say weeks ago the only plus about being relegated with 5 games to go is that you've got a little bit of a head start in terms of planning. Talking to people who are going to be free agents, because that's the market you might be in for next season. Because if the EFL hit Leicester with transfer embargo, you might have to be picking up free agents. As long as they don't give them a registration embargo, I can't imagine they'd be able to go that far. You couldn't just field the kids. So it's going to impact again on that. I would like to have thought if they were going to stick with Ruud, they would have given Ruud the green light for planning for next season in terms of who he wants to bring in, using his network to bring in some loans from United or PSV or wherever. But that doesn't seem to have happened, which makes me believe, and has made me believe for a number of weeks, the curious case of Ruud van Nistelrooy, as I wrote several weeks ago, that he won't be the manager next season. And they'll be bringing somebody in. But again, who's going to want to come in and take that job at Leicester City with the potential of a huge points deduction being hit with them? The task of getting them back into the Premier League then suddenly becomes much, much more difficult. So it's got to be somebody with a brave, or somebody with nothing to lose.
Well, let's just sidetrack. I was going to come on to that at the end, but as it's been mentioned, let's sidetrack this. Sky have just reported today that Ruud van Nistelrooy will be sacked after the Bournemouth game.
I think that's most people's perception. It's most people's perception.
Yeah,
but
the link is that has been the one we've obviously been linked with is Russell Martin, which I think maybe 1%, if that, of the fan base actually want. If you're going to get a manager that's worse than Ruud van Nistelrooy. And I did a show last night, and I had 3 Leicester fans on with me, a couple from different channels, Jack and Manny. I know you know Jack. And they all 3 of them said they'd sooner stick with Ruud van Nistelrooy than go with Russell Martin. But we say that about Watford. Who would take on the Watford job? But managers do.
Yeah, because they're a certain type of manager, aren't they? They're right at the start of their careers. They're waiting for an opportunity they didn't think would ever come. Then this opportunity comes, they seize it and think, well, perhaps I can be the one that books the trend and survives more than 6 months here.
Yes.
And they invariably don't. Obviously Leicester have had 5 managers in the last 3 years, so they're not quite Watford territory, but they're getting there the way they've been going. there's been no clear identity about the appointments and what type of direction they want to go in terms of football philosophy and football identity at the club. There used to be, but there hasn't been for a few years now, since Brendan came in, and we did have a clear identity and a lot of success, it has to be said, for a number of years. But since then, they've bounced around. I mean, how you go from, Dean Smith after Brendan to Enzo Maresca to Steve Cooper, then to Ruud van Nistelrooy. It's, I mean, from what my understanding of the situation at the moment, they haven't actually actively met with any potential candidates for the situation, for the managerial. It's not a vacancy yet, but for the managerial position. That doesn't mean to say they haven't been assessing their options and assessing who would be potentially interested in that role. But what you find, Chris, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will realise this, that there are other forces at work in terms of information being passed into the public domain. It is sometimes in the interests of managers and players to be linked with certain positions and clubs because it adds leverage to them in negotiations with other clubs. So Russell Martin's name's been linked, because he's available, plays a similar type of football to Enzo. I can't see how the Leicester fans would be really excited about that, because if they got frustrated with Enzo's idea in terms of the patient build-up, Russell Martin's possession-based style is even more. I was going to say slow, but it's very patient, very, very patient build-up. So I can't. I'm a little bit skeptical on that one, to be honest. But I mean, I've come round to, I don't normally nail my colours to the mast in terms of what I think should happen to the club, but I can't see. I mean, normally a manager's position is untenable when you lose 17 and 19 games and go set records for not being able to score at home. But I've just seen a little bit in the last few games that makes me think, well, perhaps Ruud had learnt all this. He's learnt the hardest lesson ever. It's been the toughest period of his footballing life.
It has. Perhaps. But as Brad would say, how many ex-players actually, British ex-players, when you look at the likes of Lampard, Gerrard, Rooney, there's not a good list, and I'm sure people could list names of players that have gone through and made good managers. Pep Guardiola, they're a star. But as a manager or as an industry, we actually reward failure. Because, look, if you were to be sacked by the Athletic, I'm not saying you would be, but if you were to be sacked by the Athletic, you would get a standard sort of, 4 weeks notice or whatever, and you'd be paid that, Where a manager, and I saw Nigel Pearson on, I think it was Sam Allardyce's podcast, and he didn't actually, because he was sort of asked, well, why did you go to Watford? Because he actually just got them out of the bottom three when they sacked him. And then they eventually, of course, went down. And he what I was reading it between the lines, and obviously you can take this many, many different ways, but the way I took it was that almost like, well, I knew if I went and they sacked me, I'd still get my money.
Well, there is that. Yeah, I mean, you take a job. I mean, Steve Cooper obviously signed a 3-year contract and he's out after 12 games. They've got to negotiate a sale. I mean, they don't automatically just pay up the whole contract. They negotiate it.
Yeah.
A compensation. Quite often it does cost a hell of a lot of money. And look at Brendan when they sacked Brendan and all his staff. I mean, Brendan was the highest paid manager in the club's history. He was on somewhere around 7-8 million a year. So it's a lot of money to negotiate. But they negotiated that, and that's why it was by mutual consent.
Yeah.
So and obviously the terms of that we don't know. But and it was mentioned in the accounts, the last accounts that were published for 22-23, that the losses were a lot of that was, a part of that was the cost of paying off the manager. So it is substantial, and that's why that's why I can't understand why clubs, and it's happening more and more, bounce around so much in terms of managers. Because it's a costly business to keep changing your manager all the time. At some point, you just got to stick and have faith. I mean, how many times did Nige come close to being sacked.
You won't.
I mean, I can remember the
Very
fans.
close if the rumours are to be believed.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
they weren't rumours. He was
Right, yeah.
sacked. He was told he was sacked and reinstated hours later.
Yeah.
By Vichai. So I mean, Shaky told me he was on his way to watch a game at Birmingham City that night, a scouting mission, and he got a phone call. Said, "Well, you want to hold your horses here, Craig, because I think we're done." And he turned around and started to go home. By the time he got home, well, actually, yeah, we might have another go at this. It's been called off. So
was it Top that actually fired him and Vichai that changed it, or the other way around?
That was my understanding. Yeah. I mean, I think Vichai was quite close to Nige. So they had a really good relationship, and and what a great decision that was, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, Nige has had 2 spells as manager of the club, and both times he's never been sacked for poor performance or poor results. He's left the club for very different reasons at both times. Yeah. So, he's been. I mean, I thought it was wonderful. The fans gave him such a great reception when he came back.
Yes.
But I say that as somebody who suffered his wrath from time to time.
You weren't an ostrich, though, were you?
No, I wasn't the ostrich. No.
But it's like, I mean, I'm sure if he did come back in, let's say, and I know a lot of people are asking for a director of football, one bad season with signings, and those fans that were cheering him would soon be booing him. We're not fickle as fans, are we? Why do they give managers these 3-year contracts? I mean, it costs us more then if we do have to sack them. Yeah. It doesn't guarantee that they're not going to leave, because the bigger fish will always come and poach, like with Enzo. So it doesn't make any guarantees at all. All you can probably do is get a little bit of compensation. Which
the longer the contract, terms of the contract, the more compensation. It's the same with a player. If a player signed a long contract and somebody else comes in from their fee's going to go up because the cost to his football club.
But the 10 million we've got for Enzo really is pocket money, let's be honest with you. Can't they sort of give out rolling contracts and say, well, you have a good season, we'll extend it?
Yeah, but what sort of manager would want a rolling contract? They want security. They want to know that if the club does decide to change a manager, that they're going to get compensated for that. So not many managers would agree to sign a rolling contract. So if you want to get your top target, you've got to convince him he's coming. You've got to not only convince him about the footballing project, but you've also got to reward them financially for that as well.
Well, like Dorco said, PSR is a rolling contract, isn't it? Good point, Dorco. I just think, if somebody believes that they can do the job, when I used to apply, and I changed my jobs a lot, I'm not going to, argue that, but I never went in and said, well, if you sack me for any reason, you're going to have to pay me extra. If there's no other industry where you can be sacked for getting a club relegated and walk into it next.
There's no other industry like football.
There isn't. That is true. A lot of people have been going on about the players we bought, and they always will. Whoever, if we were to sign Messi, there's some players that we go, right, he's too old. Why do we buy him? What we got him in for? And they look at the wages and go, quite rightly in Edward's case, we're paying 90 grand a week or whatever it is for him to sit at home and do the knitting. Yeah. But is there always a relegation clause in there?
Well, it depends on the negotiations.
Yes, yeah.
The vast majority of the time, the club will insist on that to protect themselves, because you never know. I mean, I'd be surprised if there's anybody. Leicester hasn't got a relegation clause, and likewise, when they sign in the Championship, there'll be a promotion clause, so their money will automatically go up. They're rewarded. I mean, there's various clauses, but they're rewarded for their performance. So they get a base wage, but appearances. You get so much for appearances. You get so much for goals, assists. For loyalty, for longevity at the club. Obviously promotions. Performance in the table, there will be some sort of bonuses system as well. So there's lots of facets to a player's contract, and they are individually negotiated. I mean, there is a standard contract, but obviously not all those terms of that will be acceptable to the agent. So the agent will negotiate on certain points, and then once those discussions are agreed, that's when you say the terms have been agreed. That's that famous quote whenever there's a transfer imminent. They've agreed terms, right? Well, that's it, because they've had a negotiation about what they want to get out of it. So it's all individual.
We spoke earlier about when this might kick in. It's not going to be this season. We won't be that lucky, would we? It is probably going to be next season.
Yes, I think that's what the Premier League and the EFL will be pushing for as well, for any sanctions to be brought in next season. Otherwise, as I said earlier, if you brought it in for this season when Leicester have been relegated, it's not really a deterrent, and it's not meaningful in any way. It doesn't have any impact on anything other than the prize money.
Couple of million.
So all this for that, that I don't think they will look at that. But Leicester might be arguing, well, you said that you should be any sanctions should be brought in the season after those contracts were brought, so that should be this season technically. So they might argue that might be one of Nick DeMarco's little aces up his sleeve. He might be arguing, well, you're supposed to be punished for the previous season in the next season, not the season after that. But this is all unprecedented, so we don't really know. But I can imagine that's the argument.
Yeah, he must be the richest solicitor in the country, let's face it, And I mean, I must admit, Craig said to me on one of the shows that, is it better that we get that points deduction in the EFL because we've got, more games, because we're going to be playing 46 games rather than 38? Is it better that we've got those extra games to try and claw back any points? But then somebody said, well, they'll take that into account when they set what the points deduction is, that they would probably be higher because it's in the EFL.
I don't know whether it's going to be higher because it's in the EFL. What I would say is, though, you can still get promoted and finish 6th in the championship. So if you took a big points deduction and you still had a squad that was capable of, say, winning the championship like last time, if you kept your Wilfs and various other the big hitters, then you've got a chance of getting the playoffs then, and then it's all the bets are off. But it'd be unfortunate. I mean, it's certainly if you went in the Premier League and you got hit with 12 points, that's it.
Yes,
and I think this might be the case. If somebody suggested that, I think it was Kieran. Was it Kieran Maguire? I think Kieran Maguire said something about they could wait for the next time Leicester in the Premier League and then put the points to. Well, what was the point of doing that? Because Leicester might well sack it off. And then how's that going to look for the Premier League, the most competitive league in the world? When it seems like, well, you've killed us already, so we'll not bother. We'll not bother this season. We'll just accept that we're going to go straight down. We're not going to risk our bit of highly paid players to injury. We'll put the kids out every week. Yeah, you can give us a smashing, whatever, but your league's going to be screwed then. So there is an element of that as well. No, but I suspect logically they'll try and bring in the sanctions next season at some point. So we as I said, we might not even hear till halfway through the season. Yeah, how many points?
If we have a transfer embargo, does that stop us extending or re-signing players that are already with us?
That's a registration embargo. Registration embargo stops you signing new contracts and registering players, effectively registering new contracts, registering players. Transfer embargoes just means that you can't bring in players from other clubs. But so
youngsters would be able to, you could
reward, like a Jeremy Monger, you could sign him on a contract, as long as there's not a registration embargo.
Right.
But I think we're looking at a points deduction rather than that. There might be a business plan. The EFL might bring in a business plan and say, well, last time you came in, you had a budget of 107 million. We're going to restrict that this season. We're going to make sure that you have a business plan, that you operate on this sort of budget.
Yeah.
And to meet that budget, you're going to have to sell players. That's because that's what they tried to do last time. So logically, you'd expect that's what they're going to try and do this time. This is what I mean about stop messing about, stop wasting time. What the plan is for next season, you've got to get it going now. Yeah. Because at the moment, you're not under those sort of sanctions. So if you've got sort of players that you think you can get in on a free transfer or whatever, and you get them lined up. So as soon as the window opens, bang, before any of these sort of sanctions can come in, and then you're off and running. But it just seems really, really odd to me, the process. I mean, if they were going to really get rid of Rude and put Andy King in charge the rest of the season, it would have made no difference. Relegation was done.
Well, a lot of fans were saying that, because, the argument is, was Rude, while he was still in charge, he's falling out with Winks, he's falling out, looks like, with Koulibaly. Is his being there being more detrimental and poisonous than putting him on gardening leave or just totally sacking him and getting him out?
It all depends, really. I mean, the thing with Rude is he's tried to raise. He wants all the players to live up to the standards that he had as a player. I mean, you can't argue with his playing pedigree, Real Madrid, Man United.
No.
And his ultimate professionalism got him there, because I did a feature where I spoke to a lot of his former teammates and coaches in Holland when he was a kid and he was growing up, and they all said the same thing. He wasn't the standout player, but he just had this attitude, this mindset, this determination, and ultimately the professionalism to have the career that he had. He's now trying to establish similar standards at Leicester City. Now you could say, well, you could side with those players, but if they've not met his standards, then should they be at the club under him? But this is the thing again. So if Rude stays, you would expect Winks is going to go. I mean, I probably think Winks probably will go anyway, because he's a bankable asset and he is a Premier League player, I think. But Yannick as well has not featured in the squad for a long, long time. Koulibaly was Rude's only signing, but he's started one game and was pulled off at half time. So these things are going to be addressed.
He's shown himself to be very dissatisfied in the French press.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, there's going to be a massive turnaround in that squad. There has to be. About far as I imagine will
please God, let him go.
Victor Christiansen, probably. We know Mads and Bilal might be sold as they're the two biggest assets in the team. The team's going to look very, very different, I think, next year. You've got a decision to make on one of your highest earners in Wilfred Ndidi. What do you do? Do you make and this is all decisions that the managers should be making. So you need to have the identity of the manager sorted now.
Very
should he be captain or should he be sold? No,
that's it. And should we have? I'm very quickly. I'm going to just, because I know you were looking at the time here. I just want to get these last three questions in.
Yeah, no problem.
Should we have a coach then rather than a manager? Because we've got managers that are saying, well, look at Steve Cooper came in as a manager, and you could argue with his selections of who he bought. Would we be better off with a coach rather than a manager?
But then you need a sporting director that's going to take on the managerial role in many ways. So the coach sets the standards.
Are you suggesting that
Mr.
Rudkin might not be up to that job?
I've said to you before, haven't I? I think I've said it on this show, but I've said it on so many. They need help in that managerial structure, because if you think when they had all the success, 2016, Vichai was calling the shots, the main decision maker. Susan was very close to Vichai. That's why she was appointed CEO when he took over all those years ago, because she'd done wonderful work for him with King Power. And then on the other side, you had Top, who was then working very closely at the club with John when he was appointed as director of football in 2015-16 season.
Yeah.
So you had like a family tree. Vichai at the top, Susan overlooking the commercial running of the football club, and then this side you had Top and John. So they formed a very good relationship. Then you lose Vichai tragically. Your main influence at the football club, your big decision maker, the visionary is gone.
Yeah.
Susan then gets sort of marginalised in many ways. She's not involved in football decision making anymore. I mean, she's very much on the commercial side, running of the football club, which hasn't been doing badly considering everything. But then you've gone from a 4-person sort of managerial framework to 2. And Top's got to step up and do all the other stuff that his dad used to do, as well as looking after the football club. So that basically exposes John Rudkin. Rudkin is then the only man that's doing it. They need more people. They need more senior management at that football club to help. Now, whether that means John takes on a different role and they bring in a director of football like a Dan Ashworth or whatever to oversee it, to work closer with the manager. Yeah. And I still would keep a manager. But what they need to have is some sort of vision and sort of principle of what they are, how they want to play, from the top of the first team all the way down in the academy. Everybody tries to play in a similar way. So
which is what Enzo was trying to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, but Enzo wanted that. Yes. Brendan wanted that. So when those kids come up to first team level, all that is different is the environment. The football's the same. You know, what's been asked of them is similar to what's been asked of them in the under-21s and under-18s. So when they step into that first team atmosphere, all that's different is the stadium and the people, which isn't insignificant, but you know, at least they've got some confidence in what they're being asked to do on the pitch.
They know what they should be doing on the pitch, I guess. I mean,
exactly.
But if you come as an England manager, you know, you decide on your style, formation, and then you pick the players that would fit into that position.
But England have that pathway. England, that is part of the philosophy at St George's Park. So when they step up, they get into that. I mean, Steve Cooper told me this because when he was under 17s England manager. So when they step up, you know, they can do different things tactically in a game, of course. Yes, set pieces differently, whatever. But the principles of how they play are the same. So when they get into that first team arena, it's not a shock and awe to them. It's not all completely alien to them. They know they can call on, I don't know, that muscle memory of how to play for England at the senior level. And that's why I think we've had so many young talents come through at England level, international level, because that pathway is open. Leicester City need to have that pathway open. We've got some youngsters coming through, I think, are really exciting. And I think it's now time. You can't have all kids. You've got to have some experience with them to help them guide them.
Yeah.
And you've just lost your most influential player in Jamie Vardy. But now those kids like the Monga, Evans, Will Alves, Ben Nelson, there's so many coming through. I think there's an argument for making Hamza Chowdhury the team captain next season. And because he's come through that pathway, he can help these young players get into that level. I've seen a difference in Hamza. He's grown up a lot.
Yeah.
So I think he's a real one of my big shouts for, you know, club captain next season. Hamza sets the standards for the others, and
that is well, we'll see what the response to that is. But I can see where you're coming from with that.
I just see a bit difference to it. I mean, Championship, you know, you got to be competitive, you got to be athletic. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing about Leicester this season is they haven't been athletic enough. They haven't been aggressive enough. They've been too easy to play against because they're standing off teams. You can't do that in the Championship, and I think he would probably set that standard. Ricky Pereira, if you keep him, the only question mark is how many games is he going to be able to play. But that's the sort of thing. That's the sort of direction I think I personally would be going in with them.
Negotiate with very quickly. We touched on you touched on this earlier about buying players' contracts out. I mean, is that I've said this before? Is that if you're paying somebody 70,000-80,000 a week and they're not playing, whilst, you know, some may say, well, I'll sit here, thank you very much, Danny Ward, and I'll take my money for as long as it lasts, you know, I'm on a good little number. Others might say, well, I want to be playing, but, you know, nobody's coming in for me because you want so much. Is that, do you think, a possible line they could go down with some of our sort of players that we've got on high wages?
It's not, if there's not buyers, I mean, and this is the problem. I mean, you see it every summer. Oh, they should get rid of him, get rid of him, get rid of him. You can only sell players if there's a buyer.
Yes.
And you can only sell a player if he wants to go. Now, the wages that some of the players at Leicester have been on for the last few years, not many other clubs are paying them that much.
No.
So, you know, and because there's been failure over the last 3 years, two seasons relegation, you know, those players are marked a little bit. So it's very hard to find buyers for them that are going to take them and pay them anything close to that. The alternative then, if you can't move them on, in terms of transfers is to negotiate a payoff to cancel their contract, which is not cheap. Yeah. So say a player's got like let's take Yannick just as an example, because he signed a 3-year contract last summer. You know, he is for me the quintessential story of Leicester City's last 3 or 4 years. You know, Brendan brought him in, said he was perfect for how they wanted to play. Then he said he wasn't perfect for how he wanted to play. Cast him aside, cast him out completely. Enzo comes in, brings him back in because Connor Cody gets injured in pre-season, and suddenly he's integral to the team, key player. Enzo loves him. Signs a new contract, which he signed effectively during the registration embargo, so they couldn't register him that new contract until that registration embargo was up, which by that time Enzo had gone. So like, he's already signed his contract now. Enzo wanted him to sign his contract. Now Enzo's gone. Now Yannick's 3 years. Steve Cooper don't really come in and it's like not really having him much. And then Rude comes in, has him for a bit, and then doesn't have him, you know, all over the shop. But he's still got 2 years to go. So you could say to him, look, we'll give you a whole year's money lump sum now, and or a year and a half, and let you go now, so we can free up your registration. We can bring somebody else in, but it's expensive, and it all adds up to the PSR calculations. So you can see how it's like a really tricky sort of like a web of different things that you know you have to do. Nothing in football is black and white or binary. There's so many variations and nuances.
If only it was, it'd make everybody's job a lot easier.
Loads of shades of grey. And it's not like fans sometimes think that you can just get rid of a player. You can it's not that easy. Very
last question, really. This business plan, management plan, whatever you want to call it, I very much would. I'm actually at the point of actually quite welcoming it, because surely the way that this club is being run at the moment is not very well. Most fans would say, like you say, we don't know the full picture, but looking on from the outside, it looks like, you know, the proverbial pissed up in the brewery. If you've got somebody coming in and saying, right, we're going to, you know, put this business plan on you or management plan, I'm thinking good. Because we might have people looking at things that actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, it all depends on the terms of the business plan. Yeah, but it is designed to stop you from overspending, stop clubs that they perceive will have an unfair financial advantage over the others. And obviously the EFL tried to do it. I mean, this is the thing about it. The last time they were in the Championship, the EFL tried to bring it in early because of a projection of what they thought Leicester City's finances were going to be for that year. And I likened it to the Minority Report, you know, the perception that somebody's going to commit a crime in the future, so you arrest them now and punish them. You know, that is nonsensical. That is just nonsensical. But that's what they tried to do last time, and Leicester successfully argued you can't do that. You can't you can't punish us now because you think we're going to overspend in the Championship. But I think now they might try again, because they can say, well, 2 years ago you said that, and look, you spent 107 million. You know, 30 million pounds more than you had an unfair financial advantage on everybody else. So we're going to stick a business plan on you, and we're going to make it stick this time. So that would then obviously restrict how much their budget is. It would restrict, you know, in terms of, it would make them have to sell players and probably at cut prices as well, just to get them off the books. So that would be a challenge for Leicester as well, because they got to do a lot of deals then.
The only thing we're going to guarantee is that this isn't going to sort of fizzle out, and it'll go on and on and on longer than Coronation Street.
And that's why, like you said earlier, Chris, you said, well, I just want it done.
Yeah.
I just want it done. Get it done so we can go back to square one and start again. You know, we don't have these things hanging over us all the time. And it has been like a cloud over the club. For a number of seasons now, ever since 22-23. I mean, I think Susan Whelan wrote in the accounts for that season, the ramifications and the impact of relegation will be felt for a number of years. It certainly is. I mean, truer word has never been spoken. The ramifications of that particular relegation, from budgeting for 8th to finishing 18th, is rumbling on still, and it will do for a number of years.
Very, 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 very last question. This is, and I don't think you're going to have an answer for this. But your thought, Jeremy Monger, will he be with us next season?
Again, this is another uncertainty because the Rude situation.
I thought this might be a very quick yes on. Carry on, but
I personally think that there's so many big clubs that are in for him now, and what they would be offering his family, and because they'll be talking, because he's a minor, he's a kid, so they'll be talking to his folks.
Yeah.
It'd be very, very tempting for him. And I can imagine them all being, because it's life changing. That would be life changing if you went to a Man City.
Yeah,
I mean, Man City are probably the ones in the box seat in terms of getting him. But what Rude's been trying to do is showing him he's going to have more first team opportunities, more first team minutes. He's going to be at that senior level quicker, and then his value will rise, and he'll be in a better position to negotiate in the future if he's an established first team footballer in the Championship / Premier League, wherever Leicester City end up over the coming years. I think that's what he's been trying to prove to him with the performances, with the impact he's had so far coming on. But he's still 15. There's so much that can happen. I mean, obviously, Ashley Chambers is the one everybody remembers. But so he that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to convince him that in terms of football, you'll get your rewards down the line, but you'll get even more rewards down the line if you stay here and get first team football rather than going to Man City's academy and then spend the next 3 or 4 years, playing under 21s Premier League 2 football. You will develop faster at Leicester City. That's the argument they're trying to do. And Rude's been working really hard on that. Now,
the difficulty is you don't know who's going to be here, though.
Exactly. If they get rid of Rude, and Jeremy's like having his head turned a little bit by Rude, and then Rude's gone, he might go, well, the next person coming in might not give me any minutes either. So I'll go. So there is a lot to consider before you change the manager.
You wrote a bit, didn't you? I'm looking at now back at 11th of May, saying that Leicester were hopeful that he would sign or pre-con, whatever it is at that age, hopeful of a new contract for the 15-year-old.
Well, obviously he's 15. He can't have signed a contract at the moment. Right, so if he leaves, there's minimal compensation. He'll go to some sort of tribunal. When he goes to Scholars, 16s, which is next season, he can sign scholar forms, and then when he's 18, he can sign pro forms. So there's a lot of time ahead. I mean, he's so young. But he is the real deal. A lot of the players, the players we speak to off the record, they say to us, look, he's special. He's doing stuff in training that it's catching everybody's eye. I mean, I'm sure they'll try and keep him grounded in the way that pros do. But this is the thing, Sam. He's only been able to train with them once or twice a week because he's at school the rest of the time. He can't get changed with them because of safeguarding. He can't wear the club sponsors. He's so young. He is a really young talent, but he is a talent. And I just wonder whether the Ruud van Nistelrooy situation and the decision the club needs to make on Ruud and the identity of the next manager, how much that would impact on Monger's decision. Yes, yeah.
Look, Rob, as always, it's been a pleasure, and as always, thank you very, very much for giving up your time and coming on.
Problem.
And we'll probably I'll book you in for a year's time, and we'll have this conversation all over again. I am sure. There's a link there. I've also put the link in the chat and in the comments as well for people to subscribe to the Athletic. Mate, I'll probably speak to you again, but have a good summer.
No problem.
Thank you very much, and take care. And thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks very much to Rob there. Kept him a little bit longer than he probably thought, or he was able to, which is why he shot off very quickly. But always grateful. He doesn't get paid for this, and it's totally free of charge. I say in the description below there, you can see there's a link, and as I've put one right at the top of the chat as well for how to subscribe to the Athletic. Don't be strange if you're thinking, why is it coming up New York Times? That's the people that owns them. As Tom said earlier, if it's in the Athletic, it's pretty much a good source. Talking of a good sauce, I'm going to go and put some on my chips and have something to eat. And I will be back at 9 o'clock with Wayne to do the last prediction show of the season. And next year, when we'll be doing the prediction show, we'll be talking championship. Wow. How quickly has that come round? Remember this time last year, how excited we were? We'd got promotion, we were going up. And here we are, going back down again. They do say, don't they, what goes up must come down. How bloody true that is. I'll see you at 9. Thanks very much. Like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe, please. Both of those help the channel and they're free. Click that notification bell and you'll never miss another show when we go live. $1.99 for a month if you want to subscribe, if you want to become a member. That really does help the channel. Would appreciate that as well. See you at 9. Good night.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You better like them too, or I'll be back.
This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.